At a certain point in your game, your character's actions will cause Strahd to take a greater interest in them. He's going to want to learn more about these adventuring interlopers that are new to his realm. To that end, he's going to invite them to dine with him at Castle Ravenloft under the promise of peace and safety. In this video, we'll talk about the dinner event itself, right from the invitation process to wrapping everything up at the very end. We'll go over who's there, what's going to happen, and what is going through Strahd's head during this whole thing. First up, let's talk about the invitation. When your party first arrives in Barovia, Strahd doesn't care about them. They're just another in a long line of adventuring parties that are doomed to join the March of the Dead. That is until they prove themselves by performing some grand deed or defeating some heavy-hitting foe. When your party does that, Strahd is going to turn his attention on to them. He's going to want to learn more about them. Who are they and where are they from? What makes them tick? What are they afraid of? And how best can he manipulate them to serve his own ends? To answer those questions, Strahd is going to extend a formal invitation to dine at Castle Ravenloft. The module provides 4 suggestions within the narrative of when you should send this invitation. Those are when the characters deal with the Spirit Mirror in Wachter House, after St. Andrew's Feast in Vallaki, during Esmeralda's retreat at Van Richten's Tower, and after Irina and Sergei reunite at the Kresk Pool. These are all just suggestions, however. The timing of the invitation is entirely up to you. It can come whenever you want it to. Heck, if you want it to come when they arrive in Barovia first thing, and they leave Death House, that's totally fine. It's entirely up to you. That's a very valid place to put the invitation. I would wait a little bit longer, of course, until they do some great deed or defeat a difficult foe, like the Hags of Old Bone Grinder or Baba Lysaga or whatever. Maybe they picked up an item of power and Strahd knows about it and he wants to maybe do some bartering and get that item for himself. It's up to you. The invitation timing should be customized to your narrative, your story, and your characters. So do what feels right for you. In nearly all instances, except the Spirit Mirror, the invitation is delivered by somebody other than Strahd. For St. Andrew's Feast, it's delivered by Ernst Larnack, but in every other instance, it's probably delivered by Strahd's steward, Rahadin. In those cases where Rahadin delivers the invitation, he does so from the black carriage that you may be familiar with from Area I. Now he does this along the Svalich Road while the characters are traveling from one location to another. The carriage either overtakes them as they're traveling, or it's waiting ahead of them, between them and their destination, all ominous-like in the distance. It's entirely up to you. When Rahadin makes his presence known, he also makes his peaceful intentions known. He hands over his master's invitation along with any other message you wish him to convey, and then promptly gets back in the carriage without waiting for nary a response. If the characters attack him or the carriage or the horses, Rahadin does his best to beat a hasty retreat. He doesn't care about the carriage, he doesn't care about the horses, he only wants to get back to Castle Ravenloft without killing the characters. That's against the rules for him right now. He does his best to do this using a combination of his dash action, his Misty Step ability, and his Mask of the Wild ability. That should get him out of reach of your characters pretty easily. He wants to disappear into the nearby woods, which is handy because all along the Svalich Road, that's what's on either side. Now that we've talked about the invitation, let's talk about Strahd's goal with the dinner. Nothing that Strahd does is without purpose. He's not a wasteful kind of guy. He doesn't do things for no reason. The dinner is absolutely no exception. In addition to learning more about these new adventures that are in his land, he's going to have one or more overarching goals that he's going to pursue during the dinner. Purpose number 1, he might be trying to identify a new consort. Strahd is a collector of beautiful and interesting people, as you can tell from his other consorts. Now, unfortunately, one of his consorts, the newest one, Escher, is, not living up to Strahd's expectations. Strahd's getting bored, and he's looking for a new play toy. So if any of the characters in your party strike him as being a suitable replacement for Escher, he's going to pursue changing them into a vampire consort later on in the game, and then promptly locks Escher away in his crypt forevermore. Next up, he may try to identify a successor. Strahd knows that he can't leave Barovia as long as he is the Dark Lord of the realm. Now, in order to gain his freedom, somebody else has to take over. To that end, he's going to try to identify the party member with the darkest heart and see if they are worthy to step up the plate. If somebody at the dinner seems to fit the bill, he's going to start testing them and measuring them in various ways throughout the rest of your campaign, always finding them just a bit lacking in all areas. Next, he may want to negotiate. Perhaps your party has something that Strahd wants. Maybe it's one of the fortunes of Ravenloft, items of power. Maybe it's Esmeralda the Avenir. Maybe it's Irina Kolyana herself. If Strahd wants any one of those things, he's going to negotiate. He may offer something like money, or magic items, or maybe even freedom from Barovia itself. Be careful offering that last one, because your characters might actually take him up on that offer, and then poof, there goes your campaign. If he's attempting to gain any one of the items of power like the Sun Sword, or the Tome of Strahd, or the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, he's going to deal directly with the character that is in possession of that item. He's going to pull them aside and give them his undivided and individual attention. He'll speak to them in low tones so that the other party members can't hear. All of this in order to talk to them A, in private, and B, to achieve his next goal, and that is to sow distrust amongst the party. If Strahd feels like the party is a credible threat, let's say for example they have the items of power, or they've defeated several big bads throughout Barovia, Strahd is going to try to undermine their trust in each other and their unity, their party cohesion, as it were. To that end, he will attempt to take a party member away, perhaps to talk in private, where the others can't hear. He may bestow upon them a unique gift or whatnot. Anything to arouse the suspicion of the other party members. He may even try to play mind games, like saying to them over dinner, "One of you shall betray the others. I can see it happening already. I'll leave it up to you to figure out which one it is." Let's talk now about the arrival to the castle should your players actually accept the invitation. And if they don't, well, then the rest of this video is kind of a moot point anyways. Let's assume that they do. When your characters are traveling to Castle Ravenloft, when they hit Area I, the black carriage is waiting for them to take them the rest of the way. The carriage ride is optional, of course, but it is faster and it does make traversing the drawbridge a lot safer. Nobody wants to start dinner off with a 1,000-foot fall. When your party arrives in the courtyard of Castle Ravenloft, they're greeted by Cyrus Bellevue. He's dressed up for the occasion. His clothes appear to have been washed, and he's tried to tame his hair with a very pungent grease. He bows low to the party and motions for them to follow him inside through the large ornate double doors, where he leads them to Area K8, the Great Hall, and hands them off to Rohedin. At this point, if any of the characters are not properly washed or attired for a fancy dinner event, Rohedin chastises them and then leads them up to the guest room in Area K50. When they enter into the room, they find Gertruda and Escher already laying out suitable garments for all of them, appropriately sized. How did Strahd get those measurements? Well, that lets the imagination run wild, doesn't it? This encounter presents you with an opportunity to get Gertruda back into the forefront of your party's mind. Now, you see, they encountered a quest for Gertruda really early on in the campaign when they first came to the village of Barovia and talked to Mad Mary. By the time this dinner event rolls around, I guarantee you most of them have probably forgotten about Gertruda. So here you are, Gertruda's right in front of them. You can remind them what their first quest in Barovia is. Rescue Gertruda, get her back to her mother. But as we've discussed in our Castle Ravenloft video, Gertruda isn't really all that willing to go back, and Mad Mary may not be there to receive her. Additionally, if you want Escher to be a sympathetic contact within Castle Ravenloft, this is a great opportunity to have him alone with the characters, to talk with them, share his backstory, commiserate with them, and offer any assistance that he might be willing to give. When your characters do finally enter into the dining hall, the module says that they encounter an illusory Strahd playing the organ. I want you to reconsider this. Strahd here is not an illusion. He's the real deal, because he's not afraid of this little party of adventurers. So he actually shows up for his own dinner. Imagine that. Consider him also not playing the organ. You can have him playing the organ, that's fine. It's inconsequential, but in my personal opinion, I think it's more atmospheric and a bit more foreboding and threatening if he's simply sitting at the table, hands clasped in front of him, waiting in a sinister silence for the party's arrival. Strahd isn't the only NPC present during this event. Other members of his household are present either as dinner guests or as waitstaff. First up, we have Cyrus Bellevue. Despite his disheveled appearance, Cyrus is an accomplished chef. With the help of several undead servants, he cooks every meal in this dinner himself down in the kitchen. He also acts as the head waiter, coordinating the delivery of every course with his temporary assistant, Helga. You probably remember Helga Ruvak from the Made in Hell event that we talk about in that video up there. Helga steps out of her role as the castle maid at least for one night, acting as a waitress here during the dinner. She delivers all of the meals in complete silence and doesn't even make eye contact with any of the characters except for the briefest of moments. This isn't by any order from Strahd or Cyrus. She's here playing an act. She wants the characters to believe that she is an unwilling captive in all of this. This act sets up her further actions during the Made in Hell event and her subsequent betrayal. Last up on the guest list, we have Strahd's consorts, Ludmila, Anastasia, Valenta, and Escher. They're seated at the head of the table nearest to Strahd. This is an excellent opportunity for you to introduce your characters to these consorts before the late game stages. At the late game, their ability to interact and show their personality is extremely limited because pretty much everything devolves into combat by that point. So here during the dinner, don't be afraid to let the personalities of each of these consorts show. Valenta is almost entirely silent during the entire dinner, except for a bit of body language here and there. Escher acts polite towards the party, seeing a lot of himself in them, and their predicament echoes the one that landed him in his current seat. Ludmila and Anastasia are a bit catty. They are very prideful, and they look down on each one of the adventurers, no matter how powerful they are. They make little jibes and jabs here and there, and some snide comments, but other than that, they're perfectly harmless. Before we go on and talk about the actual dinner event, I want to let you know you can get this guide and all of the other Lunch Break Heroes guides in PDF format over on Patreon. These are beautifully typeset documents that you can download and keep forever. So go ahead and check that out. It's just $1. If you can't do that, click the subscribe button and the bell, and we can see you back here for all of our future videos. And also check out our Discord server. We are almost at 800 members, and we would love to add you to the community. All of that said, let's talk about the actual dinner event and all of those courses and what happens during them. Despite his brutality and his evil nature, Strahd is still a nobleman at heart. As such, any dinner event at his home is no small affair. He spares no expense and no effort to make this an exquisite dining experience for your characters. Although he can't leave Barovia, his reach knows no bounds thanks to the Vistani people. To prepare for this dinner, he has sent them out far and wide beyond the mists to gather all sorts of delightful ingredients that haven't been seen in Barovia for hundreds of years. Like any fine dining experience, dinner at Castle Ravenloft is split up into multiple courses. You have your starter, your entree, and your dessert. Each course takes about 30 minutes to an hour to complete, leaving plenty of time for dialogue and interaction. Feel free to run this in real time. Heck, have dinner while you're doing it. If you can do it, if you can swing it, go ahead and actually have a fancy dinner during this gaming session. It really adds to the atmosphere and makes a memorable experience. If you're doing this remotely, coordinate with all your players and all of you have your own dinner and your own individual courses just to spice things up. You don't have to, but it makes it a lot of fun. Whether you're doing an actual in-person dinner or you're just describing it theater of the mind style, pay attention to your players' dietary preferences. For example, if you're playing with a group of vegans, I wouldn't recommend describing a meat dish coming out in front of their characters, so be mindful of what each of your actual real-life players prefers and accommodate that. You don't want them to be uncomfortable or find things icky. You want them to actually enjoy this experience. I'll also add that at no point during the dinner does Strahd or any of his consorts actually take part in the food. Remember, they're all dead, they're all vampires. They just sit there drinking goblets of what is probably blood, let's face it. To kick the dinner off, we have the starter. A bowl of lobster bisque is set in front of each one of the characters. At this point, Strahd makes a formal introduction of himself if one has not already been made previously. He also introduces each one of the consorts in turn and then begins to talk about the history of Barovia and how things came to be. He glosses over some of the gorier bits that involve him turning into a vampire and whatnot, and he plays up his role in liberating the land from its previous owners. With his story wrapped up, he then turns his attention to each one of the characters individually, asking about their homelands and their stories and their lives. This is a great opportunity for your players to elaborate on their character backstories and fill in any holes. Have fun with it, improvise, and build things up. Next up, we have the entree. The lobster bisque is cleared away to be replaced by a plate of sliced tender beef framed by vibrant greens. In between each of the characters is a bowl of freshly baked bread and a pad of freshly churned butter. By this time in the dinner, Strahd should have a pretty good idea of who all these characters are and where they come from. At this point, he's going to start pursuing his overarching goal, whether that is finding a consort, finding a replacement, negotiation, or whatever else you happen to have in mind for him. The entree course is going to be the longest portion of this entire dinner event. Strahd is going to make a point to interact with the characters one-on-one. There's going to be a lot of conversation going back and forth between different NPCs, different characters, and whatnot. There's a lot here to keep track of. And feel free to let the players interact amongst themselves and have their own little side discussions and whatnot. This is a social event, so encourage social interactions. Once enough time has passed during the entree, or Strahd has decided that he's close enough to achieving his goals or that he's moved that ball forward, he calls for the dessert to be brought out. The dishes for the entree are cleared and saucers of fresh fruit are brought forth. The vibrant reds and yellows of the fruits, picked at the height of their seasons, contrast heavily with the dark and the shadows of the castle around them. At this point, depending upon how things have gone during the entree, tensions might be high. Things might be great, I don't know. But if tensions are high, Strahd tries to disarm things a little bit and smooth things over with a little joke. Castle Ravenloft has an extensive library. Just the other day, I was reading a book about an immortal dog. It was impossible to put down. Although Strahd has guaranteed the safety of the characters within his home, that doesn't account for the actions of the characters themselves. At any point, one or more of them can launch an attack against Strahd or his consorts or anybody else in the dining hall. In order to prevent these hostilities and minimize damage, Strahd has prepared the Wall of Force spell. If any character shows signs of aggression, he immediately casts Wall of Force to create a barrier between those characters and himself and the consorts. At that point, he does his best to ease the tensions and get the dinner event back on track. I assure you, this barrier here is for your protection, not mine. You're trying to skip to the end of the story, but we have so many more pages to go. If peace can't be achieved, Strahd and his consorts will disappear from the dining hall in mist form. At that point, all of the lights in the castle go out, and Strahd's guarantee of protection goes away. The game is on, and the party better get the hell out of Dodge. Once the dinner is concluded, assuming that the characters didn't draw his ire in one form or another, Strahd invites them to stay the night inside of Castle Ravenloft. He even invites them to explore the castle at their leisure, minus the lower levels. As long as they stay in the upper levels of the castle, their safety is guaranteed. Should they decide to spend the night, Cyrus leads them back up to the guest rooms, where he attends to their needs, and then promptly retires to his own room in area K66. What happens during the night is entirely up to your players. They may decide to explore the castle, they may just decide to take a long rest and wake up in the morning. It's up to them. If they decide to explore the castle, pretty much everything is open. They can poke their nose here, poke their nose there, but there are a few areas that aren't so great for them. Like I said, Strahd doesn't want them going into the lower levels, like the crypt and the dungeons. There's some things in there that aren't so friendly, and if your characters decide to go plundering the crypts, yeah, Strahd might not be too happy with them, especially if they decide to plunder Sergei's crypt. That's a big no-no. Additionally, if they find the treasury by some happenstance, the door there that we talk about in this video is not going to take pity on them, nor are the giant spiders. In the morning, assuming they haven't gotten themselves killed, the characters are woken by Cyrus. He then leads them down into the courtyard where the black carriage is waiting to take them wherever in Barovia they want to go. Strahd's guarantee of safe passage lasts until the final character exits the carriage. At that point, the door slams shut with a bang, the horses rear up and then dart over to Castle Ravenloft. It's quite the to-do. At that point, safety is no longer guaranteed and an ambush is not long in coming. At your discretion, go ahead and throw several vampire spawn along with a bunch of direwolves at them just to let them know that Strahd still wants them dead.